The first Scandinavians to visit here were the Vikings, who sailed around the year 1000. Their colony was short-lived, and it wasn't until the early 1600s that Scandinavians began settling, this time in the Delaware Valley. Scandinavian immigrants are best known as the 19th century pioneer farmers of the West and Midwest. But there were also many seafaring people, fishermen and sailors who settled all along the East Coast. Hans Koyev was a sailor when he came to the United States in 1922. Before he went to sea, he lived on a farm in Finland.
It was a very simple life, but I think when I'm thinking back, it was a healthy life. We lived in the country, and my parents had a very small farm. It just had a few cows and a horse, and my father used to go out in the forest carrying out timber and all kinds of forest produce. My mother, she always found something for us to do, even when we were as young as 8, 9 years old. In fact, the first winter that I was helping with my brother out in forest to make firewood, I was only 11 years old. Those days, Finland didn't have no compulsory schooling, so I didn't get too much of a schooling, but enough to know how to read and write. I left Finland in 1915, but I didn't come to the United States. I actually went to Norway, because at that time Finland was hanging together with the Russian Empire, and Finland was not supposed to supply any soldiers to the Russian army, but being that the war was going on and they lost millions of men, so there was great rumors that they would start to take men from Finland to the Russian army. And I wasn't too much for the Russian army, so I barely got the passport, and I traveled to Norway, and I started and I sailed 7 years, first in the Swedish and Norwegian ships, and then later on the American ships. And although I had been many times visiting America with the ships, I never had any great idea of coming ashore here. But in the winter 1922, we come to New York with a ship, and the ship got laid up, so they said, well, go ashore, and I did. And I met some of the boys from my hometown that had come here before that, and they said, we are here, so you stay here too, and here I am 53 years later. You see, when you go to a strange place, it's always kind of hard to get started, but I didn't have so very hard time, because the language wasn't a barrier anymore, because when I landed here, I already know some of the English language. But I can tell you that the first year that I landed here in Brooklyn, that was winter 1922, well, I left the ship and I come to Brooklyn, and I didn't have no job, so then I heard that they were hiring some men for the Tomino Gensugar factory over in Williamsburg. So me and another guy went over there, and we got a job. And we worked 10 hours a day. And when I say work, we worked real hard. And the wages were $3.70 a day, for 10-hour days. So I thought at that time that if this is how America is going to treat me, I'm not going to stay here very long. But then when I met the guy that told me that he's going to make a carpenter out of me, then we only work 8 hours a day, and we got much better wages. So that kind of gave me spirit to stay here and start to work up things. Then a couple of years later, I was a contractor myself already, and when I learned the trade a little bit and had a steady job, it looked good to me compared to what you would have if you would stay and work in Finland, because over there, especially those days, the wages were not so very big. That's why many of them come here, because they were looking for the almighty dollar. Actually, if I tell the truth, I wasn't even thinking of landing and staying here ashore. I was figuring that I would stay a few more years, and then I'll go back to Finland and get married and raise a family and whatnot. But things didn't work that way. I stayed here and I got married here. And then after I had been doing this here carpenter contracting business for quite a few years, so as we got as far as 1927 and 8, I had quite a little money already, so I figured that if I'll buy a piece of ground and build my own houses and see if I can sell them, then at least I know where the money is laying. And I started, and that's the way I started. And I've been doing quite a little building already. But then the depression came and I got caught on it with a lot of houses on my hand. And inside of a couple of years, the prices of these houses went way down. So I lost practically everything I had. So when the depression was over and things got a little better, I started again little by little, and I have been doing that all along. Well, of course, in the last 10 years, I haven't done hardly anything because I'm already 79 years old, so I kind of semi-retired. I have some business property here, and that gives me something to live by.
About 10% of those who immigrated to America from Finland eventually returned home to live. Hans Koyev discusses his feelings about going back.
Well, to be honest, I would think that anybody that has born and spent their boyhood and young man's life over there, they most likely have some kind of longing to go there. Whether that ever happened or not, that's another story. I have been thinking even now that if I didn't have the business property, if I could sell them for a reasonable price, maybe I would go there and stay for a while, because after all, I'm going to be 80 years old next May, and you can't live forever. So I figured I lived long enough here, so it wouldn't do any harm to live a while over there. I always have been very much in touch with the people. I have actually, even today, I have two brothers still living in Finland. Because I have been, as I said, I have been in the last 15 years, I have spent parts of 11 summers in Finland. So I have met a lot of new friends and also some distant relatives that are still living there, and they have been treating me very good. When I go there, they treat me so good that I'm ashamed of it.
Norwegians traditionally are travelers. Known especially as a seafaring nation, it was from Norway that the Vikings of old sailed. In the 1860s, the Lutheran Church of Norway started to establish various seamen's churches in places frequently visited by Norwegian sailors. Hjordis Mortensen's father was a sailor who became a preacher in the seamen's church located in Brooklyn, New York. She remembers how that affected the life of her family.
I came from a little town called Lillesand in the real southern part of Norway. My father was out to sea most of the time. He was a seaman. But then my father got this position as a lay preacher in Brooklyn, New York. Years ago, it was very difficult to live in these small towns in Norway. So if your father was not a seaman, he went to America by himself. And so many had fathers in America, and this girlfriend of mine, her father was in America for years and years and years. In fact, I didn't think he came back before she was grown up. Well, that was one of the reasons why my father stopped going to sea, because he said that was no life, it was no family life, when you would stay away for months and years and you never see your family. And he became very interested in this seaman's mission, so when the opportunity presented itself for him, he was very glad, even though it meant for him much less in salary, and then he had a better job. He had already gotten his own ship. He was a sea captain when he quit, and it was just around World War I. It was a good time as far as money was concerned, but as my mother always used to say afterwards, well, maybe he would have been one of those that would have been lost. There were so many ships went down at that time. My father had come here 5 years previous, and naturally he wanted his family to come over. He came over to Norway to pick us up and took us back with him to the United States. In Norway, and I think maybe in many of the European or Scandinavian countries, when you mention the word America, it was like the land of golden dreams. As they say, many immigrants dream about finding gold on the streets, but we did not. When we came here, we had a little hard in the beginning. We came to a very depressed area, not what we were used to from Norway at all, and we lived in a most undesirable neighborhood, which made it rather difficult. So it was quite a change when we came to this country where there was so many people of so many other nationalities speaking different tongues and different ways and different cultures. It was a little difficult. I started in public school down in the Red Hook section of Brooklyn. It was a little difficult at the beginning because it was mostly Italians and Irish settlers there. I was the only Norwegian in the class, being the only foreigner practically in the class, as a Scandinavian, I mean. There was a little harassment. I was called a dumb squarehead and things like that. And we did not speak English when we came here. And that made it probably more difficult because there was nobody else in the class that could speak my language. And then there was another thing that bothered me. As I said, my father was a lay preacher in representing the Lutheran Church of Norway. 99% of the people in Norway are Lutherans. And the people and the children that we came in contact with, they were Irish and Italian, and they were all Catholics, of course. And I recall one of the first days in school, a boy in front of me, a little Irish boy, he saw I had a gold cross, and he says, "Oh, you're Catholic." Now, I understood that word, and I said, "No, me no Catholic, me Protestant." And he insisted that I was Catholic, and I said, "No, no, no, I'm not Catholic, I'm Protestant." And I went home to my parents, and I cried, and I said, "Oh, they said I'm Catholic." So my father was very understanding. He says, "Don't wear the cross anymore," he says, "and just don't get into any religious discussions." It was just in the beginning when we came over, before we were able really to speak the language and mix in with them. We were just plain foreigners when we came over. We were different. They couldn't understand us, and we couldn't understand them. But, of course, after some time, this adjusted itself, and you make friends with children. In fact, one of my best girlfriends was an Italian girlfriend. She became my very best girlfriend. So there was no problems later on. In Norway, we learned quite a lot about the United States. And in fact, when I was surprised when I came over here how little the American knew about other countries. When I mentioned I came from Norway, for instance, in Norway, well, they thought that was just ice and snow and no real people lived there. But in many ways, I found that our education system there, we were further ahead. I remember one experience when I first came over here, and either the first or second day in school, the teacher put up an arithmetic problem on the board, and we were supposed to do it. Well, to me it was very easy because I had learned that a long time, and the teacher just gasped. She didn't expect that I would know that. And so, as I say, I think we were almost a little ahead as far as education was concerned. It wasn't too many years later that the Siemens Church, was a new church, and next door to that church was a big brownstone house, and the church, of course, bought that house too. So we moved into that big old brownstone, and of course that was luxury compared to what we were used to in that awful neighborhood we lived in when we first came. And then naturally living right next door to the church, and all these thousands of seamen coming daily to the church. It was like a little Norway in a way. The Norwegian Seamen's Mission started in Bergen, Norway in 1864. And first they established, I believe, in England and then the United States, and now they have it all over the world. It's a home away from home for the seamen. They were away from home for maybe weeks or months or years at a time, and they had no connection with their own people. It's not only a church, but they get their mail there. They use it as a mailing address. In fact, in the Siemens Church in Brooklyn, they had a bank department there because seamen used to come in at all hours of the day and night and week, and no other banks or anything would be open. So we had all kinds of facilities, and there was a reading room, library, canteen, and as soon as they came off the ship, they had a place to go. In fact, what my father's job was, every day they would go through the papers, all the newspapers, and find out what Norwegian ship docked that day, and they would go and meet that ship. Could be in Staten Island and Hoboken, all over. They would go and meet the ship, and they would bring the hometown newspapers and invite them to the activities in the church.
Immigration to America meant many different things to those who came here. Hjordis Mortensen talks about the meaning it has had for her.
When I look back at it now, I think I was very fortunate to have gone through this experience. You learn to mix with people and be part of them, and I think it's a great country, and I think it's wonderful that people can come to this great country and be part of it. We all become Americans after a while. And many people we have heard of that went back now to retire. People have spent most of their lives here to go back to Norway to retire. But when they have spent 30, 40, 50 years in this country, their dream of Norway, it's not like it was. And of course, new people, new ways, and they don't feel at home, and then they come back here again.
Peter Nelson arrived here from Denmark in the days when traveling was considered a great and somewhat hazardous adventure. As a young man looking for different experiences, he came to America to seek his fortune and satisfy his wanderlust.
I landed in this country, Decoration Day, the 30th of May. I landed here in 1912. We had to go very slow, you know. That year in April, the Titanic was sunk, icebergs. And I came with a boat Heliola, the Scandinavian line. That was a Danish line. I was 24. I'm 88 now. I came from, the last place was Odense, Denmark. I was in service in Odense, in the army, when I was 18. I was in service 1906 and 1907. I came out when I was just about 20. I come from the country. I was born on a farm, and it was a small farm. We only had 4 or 5 cows. But, you know, we had sheep and pigs and chickens and stuff like that. And I'd done a lot of fishing. We had the river, you know, going right by. We'd done a lot of swimming and fishing. So I liked that. I had a wonderful time. They were way above American. We had electricity. Some of them out in the country. In 1912 or before that, on the island of Foon, in there was 2 smaller towns, electric lights and all that. America was way behind. And with their learnings, they had no learning. I have met people here, they never had no schooling or nothing. You could imagine. Denmark had compulsory schooling for 225 or 50 years. You read about it. Compulsory, that meant compulsory. Yep. No getting out. I only had grammar school education, but we get a good education, let me tell you. Yeah, 14 years we get confirmed. We are Protestants, we are Lutherans, you know. But it's the same as the Catholics, except we have no confession. We go to the altar, you know, and when we get confirmed, you know, we go 6 months to the minister and learn some hymns, you know, that you're supposed to. And then that minister, he wants a couple of dollars, you know, when we get confirmed, you know. Then he gave us chocolate and cake. When I left Denmark, I was on a farm. Then I went back to a farm. I had more money than I could make here. Gee, much more money. Yes, I had 12. He offered me 1,200 kroner. Kroner was worth a lot of money that time. It was 2.68 to the dollar. So that's the last job I had, and I made enough money there, and if I gun for my fare coming here, and I had so much clothes, I looked like the Prince of Wales when I come here. Oh boy. I took the 3rd class, and we went to Ellis Island. We danced all night, you know, and in the morning we got up, and I was only over there maybe a couple of hours, you know, get examined there, you know, and turn your eyes inside out, see if, you know, and everything went fine. I passed everything. Then I landed in New York City. My nephew was with me, and it was thundering and raining, and I saw garbage cans standing on the street. Who? I says, what kind of city is this? In Copenhagen in the morning, there's no such a thing as garbage cans. Everything is clean. It's a whistle. You can eat off the street. Wow, this was dirty. And then I was here, I hated the first year. It takes a little. After 2 or 3 months, I could speak the language. Fairly, I could understand, And after 5 or 6 months, I could get around good. Yes. I went to New York and got a job. I got a job after, over Christmas, I was butler. A butler. Could you imagine? Yes, I had the pantry here, and the cook was there, and had the cellar to take care of, I had to sit at the table and all that. And then, I was some butler. I'm telling you, I was the doorman. In my room, the woman, she asked me where my pajamas was. I said, I put them in the trunk. I had no pajamas. Didn't know what they were. Then I got a job. Jobs was, I don't know if you were scared at that time. I took a job. I got a job with, way up New York State. 310 miles up. So I was in a dairy. I knew how to make butter. I made fairly good here. I had, at that job, I guess I had $60 a month. I had my clothes for the dairy and everything, nice board and room and all that, That was a lot of money that time. Today it's no money at all. But then we got married. My wife was getting $40 and we had $100. Then she was getting $45. I got 9 children. With all the children, there was one woman, she says to my wife, you got so many children. She only had 2, she couldn't take care of them. We could take care of ours, and they're well off. During the Depression, we were sitting on top of the world. I never owned a farm. I rented farms. We had 50 acres in sweet corn. We took to market. But that time, during the Depression, a lot of farmers, they were in the hole, they were in relief, some of them. That's right. Believe it or not. I have gone to Newark, and I have seen those poor people standing in the street waiting for a bowl of soup. That's a terrible thing, to be hungry. Oh, it was tough. It must have been tough. But we had it good. We took all our life insurance out, the kids, children's life insurance, cast it all in. I had the money. Nice when it comes to that point, right? And we lived like king. You wouldn't know what it is to sit to a table where you really eat. Yeah.
Like many immigrants, Peter Nelson has developed a strong feeling for his second home.
I love America today. Of course, this is the only country for me. I don't care for Denmark. My wife didn't want to go back to Denmark. I never went to Denmark since I came over. After we got rid of all the cows, the business, we could have gone. I had plenty of money and everything. She says, I don't want to go. She says, Papa, I got my children here. She says, my parents, the last one had gone away. I got nothing to go home for. She says, I'm not Danish anymore. No. When you took your citizen paper out, you swear out there. I like Denmark. Oh, good Lord. I certainly take my hat off for Denmark. I don't go back on them. But you don't know anybody.
Not everyone who has immigrated to the United States has discovered a land of happiness. For people like Marta Walker, life in their homeland seems more real than the new life in America.
I came over here in November 1963 from Stavanger, Norway. I can't compare with the United States, of course, because I always heard the United States was something special and all that. But it was, it's a quiet town. It's got very narrow streets with the cobblestones downtown, and it's got just small shops or stores, and we got the harbor coming in, or where the fishing boats used to come in all the time. We used to go down there, and there's one thing I miss very much from Norway. We could go down there, and they used to come in with the boats, and you used to buy the fresh fish right from there. And you put it in the newspaper, with take it home with you, and that thing, it was dead. They cut a head off and everything. But that thing was still going like alive there in the newspaper, you know. And all the fresh shrimp and lobsters to come right over. You know, everything was so fresh, you know. You knew it was just caught. And there's a beautiful market down by the harbor there. They got everything, vegetables and flowers and fruit and everything. I remember when I was 15, 16 years old, right? And I used to have this boyfriend. And we just used to be happy just walking. You know, there was a special road that we used to walk. That it wasn't like a lover's lane or anything like that. It was a traffic street, but that was where everybody, all the couples used to walk there. On Wednesday evenings, especially on full moons, that was it. That was it, absolutely. You just walk up and down that street. Then he used to take you home, and it was quite a walk, I tell you that. Maybe he'd give you a kiss, and that was it. And it's a big difference today, you know. I don't think they do the same thing back home now. Like when I was young, I don't think so. There wasn't that much to do. Not really. We used to go to a museum about almost every Sunday. Go to a museum, and I knew that museum inside out. I knew every animal in there. Because that was like the thing to do on a Sunday. Go to a museum, or we go down to the park and feed the ducks and the pigeons. And because there's a lake right in the middle of town. It's beautiful, and there's benches around you can sit down. In the summer, we went swimming, and in the wintertime, if there wasn't any snow, we went sled riding. Yeah, that's about it. When I got older, you know, you go to the movies, and most of the time it was the German movies, and sometimes English movies. Some of them were restricted, you know, not like it's restricted today, far from it. But they restricted us for, you had to be over 16 to get into the movie. There was nothing bad about it or anything, it was just a grown-up movie. It wasn't a cartoon, in other words. And my girlfriends and I, we used to dress up, you know, real grown up, you know, put padding in here, you know, to see that we look bigger and all this. And we managed again to put high heel shoes on and all that. We were only 14, right? But that was one of the kicks, you know, we got into the movie. It was a big thrill, right? And I used to play the film for the whole week. And there was only two movie theaters in the town. And I used to go from one to the other, you know, back and forth. They spoke in English, right? But they had the subtitles underneath in Norwegian. That's where I picked up my English, I think, from going to the movies and from reading. I used to love Mickey Spillane's books. Oh, and everybody else seemed to like them too, because I think it was once a month they used to come out. And I had to be there early to get it, because everybody would grab it. They would go like hotcakes. We saw it on the movies about the United States. America is so beautiful. The streets are almost lined with gold. And when I was a child, when I went to school, it was like another world. It seems like all the young people over there, it was like a big thing. Oh, you're going to the United States, right? A couple of friends of mine, they went over. One went to Chicago, and she came back. She liked it, but she said it's a rat race. And she said you got to be very strong to take it over there, because otherwise you won't make it. If you're not strong, you won't make it over here. I met a guy over there, and we got married over there. He was in the Oceanographic Survey for the United States, and we came over here. He doesn't speak any Norwegian, and I could speak some English then, and well, I guess it's like when you marry somebody, you're supposed to go with your husband, right? I came over here by plane, and I had the children with me, and it was nice, because it was exciting. You know, the first time, you know, I got to the United States, everything was so huge. I never seen, I always, you know, skyscrapers and all that. I knew they were big, but, you know, it's entirely different when you really see them. The impression was that, oh my God, don't let me get lost here, because I never find my way back home. Because it's enormous. There's so many cars, and there were so many people, and it sort of overwhelmed you in the beginning. You know, I would walk up to the corner where there was a store, and that was it. And back to the house again. I was afraid if I walked 4 or 5 blocks, I would get lost. But I liked it when I got over here, because everything was new, you know, and I think I adjusted very well to it. I think I did. there were so many things that you could do. Like back in Norway, there wasn't that many things you could do. And over here, there was everything, movies all over. You could go to New York, you could do this, and shows, and it was unlimited what you could do here. But after a while, after it got all the I don't know how to explain it, but it sort of wears off after a while. And then it became more like a hassle, everything. You go to work and you come back and of course I did the same thing back home, but it still wasn't the same. I still had time to do things back home, but here I don't have time to do anything anymore. If you're going to go any place at all, you've got to have a car. Like if you want to a shopping center, you've got to have a car. You want to go to the dentist, you've got to have a car. The kids want to go to the library, you've got to drive them there. They got to go to school, you've got to drive them to school. It's back and forth, back and forth. I feel like a taxi driver all day. I got to time everything, I got to be there at this time, I got to be here at this time. But back home is different. I think we did a lot of more walking. We weren't that spoiled with transportation. We have buses over there. You guys go in the corner, you hop on a bus if you want to go to the market. If you don't feel like walking, you could walk. Over here, I'm spoiled too now. Because I wouldn't walk. It's not further from my house to the A&P than it is than going to the market back home. Matter of fact, it's further going to the market back home. But I used to do it all the time back home, but not here. I had a little problem. Going shopping. Because it was rough in the beginning because I didn't know you have so many different kinds, cereals, and sometimes I didn't even know what kind of food I was buying. Really. Until I opened the box and saw what it was, right? But I had to try, and find out. But in the beginning, it was a little hard. I was so used to, the food from Norway, and then I always tried to find something to substitute. Over there, like I told you, we had always fresh fish with everything. Fish pudding, fish balls, fish cakes, any kind of form, And I was used to it. Here you can't get it. You can hardly get fresh fish here. The meat isn't even the same. Because I try to make, even if I make meatballs in regular brown gravy, it's not the same as back home. And then, the different weights, we got kilos and grams. Over here you got ounces and pounds. And I'm trying to substitute, and it's very hard. Let this be a warning to everybody that comes here from another country. Don't get any credit cards. Honest to God. This is the worst thing that could happen to somebody that comes from another country. They think it's very easy, right? Of course, you just spend, it's $3 here. We'll just charge you can pay later. Very easy. Too easy. And you just go there and you spend a little bit here, and you give them the card, stamp and sign your name on it, right? Sign your pay away for 2 or 3 months ahead of time, right? Just don't worry about it. I found out that the hard way. And maybe it was just as well, because it came to the point that I took scissors and I cut all the credit cards off. I said, never again. And since then, I've been buying with cash. I think the first thing that I knew that I was getting settled here, that I really adjusted to American life, was when I started thinking in English. Before, I used to think in Norwegian, You would speak English and you would think in Norwegian. And that's when I realized, oh boy, now you're a real American, right? But I can't say I'm very, very happy right now. I've gotten used to it here now. And I like it. But there's so many things that goes on, with the children and everything, I have a problem with my boy. He's 16. I have a problem with him. Especially with all this smoking pot going on, marijuana and all this. And I have 2 little ones. I'm scared that they're going to grow up and I don't know what's going to happen. Because it seems like the life and everything has changed so much just since I got here. Just in 12 years, everything has changed so much. And now it's entirely different. That I can see. I know they have the same problem over there with smoking pot. I don't know if it's as widespread as over here. But if I went over there now, I don't know. I think I would miss the United States because I got used to it over here now. I've never been back. I would love to go back, but then again, it costs a lot of money because I can't just leave my 2 little ones. I got to take them with me. So it takes money, which I haven't got. Otherwise, I would have went. I want to go back home and find out if it is better over there because remember now, I'm thinking about it the way it used to be. No, I don't know. Maybe in 12 years it has changed. And maybe it's more like it is over here now. I really don't know. If I go over there and find out for myself, then I say to myself, well, it's just about the same. Or maybe it isn't. Then maybe I'll stay. I don't know. I think I learned a lot more here than I would back home about people and about life. I have learned much more, experienced a lot more than I would in Norway. Because I think if I go back home now, I can get almost any kind of job I want, which I couldn't if I was over there. I would have stuck in the same thing. I learned so much during these years that I could never learn over there. I still have my Norwegian citizenship, and I still consider myself Norwegian. Even if I become a United States citizen, I'm still always be some of Norway in me, because you can talk to even the old people. They always talk, oh, Norway. They still have it in their heart. I think it's with everybody. You would be the same if you went abroad to stay abroad. You would say, oh, America is the best, right? Of course, your own country. That's where you were brought up. You were born.
Swedish immigrants were the first Scandinavians to settle here permanently. Most left Sweden for economic reasons. But for Margaret Merrick, the United States was an adventure, a place often studied but never seen. Coming to California from Stockholm, she soon discovered what America was all about.
The first time I arrived to this country was in 1958, middle of December, and I arrived in Los Angeles. And at that time, there were no jets. So it took me 22 hours to get to the United States from Stockholm, and was, in a way, quite an experience just to set your foot in Los Angeles after leaving Stockholm in snow and arriving in Los Angeles. Of course, it was cold there according to their season, but to me it was the hottest summer day. And, just the visual intake of millions of people that looked quite different from the ones I had just left, that were bundled up in fur coats and other warm things. And here in Los Angeles, they were stripped down to minimum of clothing, and very different clothing from what I had just seen. To see the palm trees instead of the fir trees, this was such a change. And heavens, to go to beach in December seemed like such an excitement that alone could bring me half the way around the world. The difference not only in air temperature, but in atmospheric feeling. It's sort of a rushed up tempo. It's some sort of sense, vibration I get of hiked up tempo towards something that I feel that most people don't even know what it is. And it seemed dirty. It seemed unclean, uncared for, which is not so usual in Scandinavia. Everything looks as if they just dusted and cleaned everything off. So this was very different. I've always, I think, been interested in people. I knew that the Hollywood movies that you saw couldn't just tell the story about the people living here. It just seemed like such an artificial sort of thing. I so wanted to see, was it that way? And if so, I didn't really want to be part of it, but I thought it might be an interesting thing to see. It struck me, coming from Scandinavia, where not all people, but so many people look blonde, blue-eyed, have sort of the same stature. Here there were people of a variety of colors, sizes, and some pretty in a new, exotic way, and some I found very unattractive to me.
Many young women like Margaret Merrick come to this country for about a year to work for an American family as an au pair girl. This means that for room and board plus a small salary, They take care of the family's children and also do some housework.
I came here just actually to stay for a year as an au pair girl at that time. I'd been studying in Sweden. I'd also had, my last position was an executive secretary at a very big firm in Stockholm. And I just felt I wanted to go out and see other parts of the world and see how other people lived. And for some unknown reason, California had always attracted me. Maybe the geography, the climate and things, it seemed exotic and very different. And that's the reason why I came, with no intention to stay. It was a sort of education, adventure, getting away from studies, what I was doing at the time, just taking a break. I had friends that had also been in the United States, young girls that had been over for a year, and they liked the experience, and I thought, why not me too?
Because Margaret was working for the family of an important Hollywood producer, she was introduced to a style of life which few Americans ever experience.
As I was with people in show business, I met many very famous people that were interesting and lovely. The only thing I can say, I did not meet the average American. It turned out that as I was in that atmosphere, and I got, somewhat crooked view of Americans as I saw the cream of Hollywood. I saw the ones that had successfully made it, and the ones that were living in enormous houses. Everything seemed nice to look at, at least. And outside of the cream of the Hollywood, I met other people in show business mostly that had not as yet made it but were interesting. So I met a very limited selection of Americans at that time. Eventually I met my husband-to-be, and we did get married in California. He was in show business at that time too. So it was like there was no reason to go on anywhere else at that time. And I suppose, in a sense, I never thought of it as staying in this country forever somehow, but it was still part of the excitement. But we lived in Sweden for 1 year when our oldest son was born, and then we returned to the East Coast. My husband felt that it would be a hardship for him to make a living at that time in Sweden, plus that he had really an aspiration to build up a business here. That was the first time I came to the eastern part of the United States. It was so vastly different that I thought I'd ended up on another planet. First, we arrived by boat, coming to New York. It was in October. And I'd left rather chilly Sweden at that time too. Arrived in a very unusual situation as far as climate was concerned. It was around 80 degrees in New York. So that was a shock, and to see the harbor of New York, I don't think is a favorable experience for most people. It wasn't for me. It was sort of a shock. It was, again, many colors, many people, many things, but on a much different level than what I'd seen in California. There was not the excitement, seeing something new. It was what I'd seen in California, the parts of California that I didn't particularly care for. Is what it, reminded me of. The skyline of New York looked exciting, but that was all I saw at that time, And so it was a very hard adjustment to come here at that time.
Living in a country and feeling it is your home can often be two separate things for an immigrant.
I cannot say I feel at home in a sense. I probably will never feel at home anywhere anymore. Once you have left some place that actually was your home, you took up something there, you tried to settle down here, but I can't completely see that. I didn't really pull up my roots completely there, and I can't therefore plant it completely down here. So I feel like I 1 foot here and 1 foot there, and I enjoy this area, but I think it is like that no matter what, how successful, how fantastic you build up your future here, it's some part of you that will always be there. But if you decide to move there, you would miss things from here, because here you have established your adult life. Geographically, I think I really love Sweden. I think the nature there I really miss. I'd say Scandinavia and the United States are the two parts of the world that are most similar in many ways, in progressive thinking, in industrial progress, in education in many ways. So there are not that many dissimilarities. It's the basic culture, the history, it's an emotional thing rather than a practical, physical thing. I was more Americanized the first 2 years I was in this country than I'm now. I wanted to fit in more at that time. I didn't want to seem so foreign. At that time, I wanted to learn as much as I could about the American culture, the American people. I wanted to learn many of those things. Once I realized that I probably would live here most of my life, I realized how important my Swedish background was to me, and that I in no way wanted to lose it. And I started to cultivate, my traditions and things, and felt that they were too important to me to let go. I'm still a Swedish citizen, and I presume that I always will be. For all practical reasons, I might as well be an American citizen, but I don't know. It's probably, it's the same with several of my friends that say I couldn't change my citizenship. It would be like losing my identity, which is, of course, a lot more in your head than it actually is. But that's the way I feel about it. Right now, I and my husband and my children, we're going to Sweden, and we're actually going to look for a little place in the archipelago, a very small, humble sort of cottage or whatever that we can call our own, that we will go to when we have vacations. I always say I want to die in Sweden, I don't know why, but I didn't leave it because I was in misery. I didn't leave it because I didn't see any future in it. I didn't leave it because I didn't have anybody there. I left it to come back to it because I just wanted, maybe part of my Viking blood, takes me out on adventures. And I just simply want to see something else.